The moment did not begin with thunder or light. It began with silence, an unnatural stillness that crept through the imperial palace like a held breath. Deep within the sanctum of the golden throne, where the emperor of mankind had endured 10,000 years of unending torment, something shifted. Not a signal, not a command, a decision. For the first time since the heresy, the emperor tried to move. The throne screamed. Ancient mechanisms strained against a will they were never meant to restrain. Psychic containment fields flared, flickered, and stabilized by instinct alone. Across Terra, astropaths convulsed in unison, blood pouring from eyes and ears as a pressure unlike anything before crushed their minds. The Astronomicon wavered, not dimmed, but bent, its impossible light twisting as though reality itself were bracing for impact. This was not awakening, this was departure. The Emperor was attempting to leave the Golden Throne. Within the deepest vaults of Titan, alarms no mortal had ever heard began to sound. Sigils burned themselves into stone. Hexagrammic wards ignited, ancient and absolute. The Grey Knights felt it instantly, not as fear, but as certainty. A command older than their order, embedded into their gene-forged souls, now activated. The Emperor's will was moving, and it had to be stopped. On Terra, the Custodes stood frozen in disbelief as the impossible occurred. The skeletal remains bound to the throne shifted, not in weakness, but in resistance. Psychic pressure surged outward like a collapsing star. Walls cracked, sanctums collapsed, servitors burned out instantly, their brains reduced to ash. The Emperor's presence swelled beyond containment, no longer passive, no longer anchored. If he stood, the throne would fail. If the throne failed, the warp would pour into Terra unchecked. Humanity would not merely fall, it would be unmade. The Emperor knew this, and still he pushed forward. His mind, vast beyond comprehension, reached outward, not to rule, not to command, but to act. 10,000 years of immobility had not dulled his purpose. The galaxy was dying slowly, rotting beneath endless war, corruption, and stagnation. The throne had preserved humanity, but at the cost of progress, of evolution, of survival. The Emperor no longer sought preservation, he sought correction. Reality began to fracture around him. Warp storms recoiled instinctively, not attacking, but retreating, like predators sensing a greater hunter. Demons across the Imperium screamed as a pressure unlike annihilation passed over them, not destruction, but judgment. The Chaos Gods felt it too, not fear, alarm. For the first time since the siege of Terra, the balance shifted. That was when the Grey Knights arrived. They did not charge, they did not shout, they knelt first. Every one of them, silver-armored forms etched in warding sigils, their presence a psychic counterweight to the Emperor himself. Their Grand Master arose alone, voice steady despite the reality-shattering force pressing against his soul. They were not traitors, they were not heretics, they were the last lock on a door never meant to open. They knew what would happen if the Emperor walked free. The Astronomicon would collapse, interstellar travel would shatter overnight, entire sectors would be swallowed by the warp before humanity could react. The Emperor's physical form, unbound from the throne, would become a beacon. One chaos could finally strike directly. His movement would ignite a war so absolute that even victory would mean extinction. The Emperor understood them, and that knowledge made his will burn hotter. The pressure intensified. The palace groaned like a dying god. Time itself stuttered. For a heartbeat that felt like eternity, humanity stood on the edge of transformation or oblivion. The Grey Knights did not draw their weapons, they raised their minds instead, forming a psychic bastion of absolute refusal. Not against a god, against their creator. And in that moment, the fate of the Imperium balanced on a single, impossible truth. Sometimes, even the Emperor of mankind must be stopped. The pressure inside the imperial palace did not explode outward. It compressed inward, folding space and thought upon themselves as the Emperor's will collided with the absolute psychic resistance of the Grey Knights. The clash did not resemble battle. It was closer to tectonic plates grinding beneath reality itself, slow, inevitable, catastrophic. The Golden Throne's mechanism shrieked as ancient failsafes activated in cascading sequence, systems older than recorded history fighting to restrain a god who no longer accepted stillness. Across Terra, millions died without understanding why. Astropaths burned out instantly, their minds unable to process the Emperor's expanding consciousness. Navigators screamed as the Astronomicon twisted into something sharper, more focused, less forgiving. For the first time in 10 millennia, its light carried intent. Warp routes destabilized, entire battle fleets vanished mid-transition, torn apart by currents reacting instinctively to the Emperor's movement. The galaxy felt it, not as pain, but as pressure, a tightening noose around existence. Within the throne chamber, the Custodes struggled to remain standing. Their gene-forged bodies endured what would have annihilated space marines, yet even they felt their knees buckle as gravity, psychic force, and raw will distorted the air. The Emperor's presence was no longer passive. It was vast, active, deliberate. He was not awakening into confusion. He was awakening into purpose. The Grey Knights held their formation. Their psychic barrier was not built on raw strength. It was layered discipline, ritual precision, and absolute clarity of purpose. Each knight anchored the others, minds interlocked through sigils and battle cant older than their order itself. They were not resisting the Emperor's power directly. That would be impossible. They were resisting the consequences of his movement, reinforcing the throne's function through denial, containment, and sacrifice. Blood ran from their eyes. Several fell, their hearts stopping as their minds burned out under the strain. Their bodies hit the obsidian floor without ceremony, silver armor cracking as the psychic load redistributed across the remaining knights. No one broke formation, no one hesitated. This was not heroism, it was function. They had been created for this moment. The Emperor felt them clearly now. For 10,000 years, his perception of humanity had been distant, abstract, filtered through pain and stasis. The Grey Knights pierced that isolation. Their resistance was not defiance, it was loyalty so absolute it manifested as refusal. They were willing to oppose him not because they doubted his vision, but because they understood it too well. They knew what his freedom would cost. The Emperor's mind reached outward again. He saw the Imperium as it truly was, bloated, decaying, locked in endless repetition. A civilization surviving by inertia, not purpose. The throne had preserved humanity, but it had also frozen it. Chaos thrived not because it was stronger, but because humanity no longer moved forward. The Emperor's solution was simple and terrible. Intervention. Direct, uncompromising, immediate. But intervention required motion. The Grey Knights responded by tightening their psychic lattice. Sigils flared brighter, etched symbols burning through ceramite and into flesh. Warp-resistant armor began to crack. Reality itself screamed as incompatible truths pressed together. If the Emperor took another step, if his will pushed even slightly harder, the throne would fail catastrophically. Terra would become a warp breach of unprecedented scale. The Sol system would be consumed in moments. For the first time since the heresy, the Emperor hesitated, not from doubt, from calculation. He saw the branching futures unfold simultaneously. In one, he rose, shattered the throne, annihilated chaos in a blaze of psychic annihilation, and extinguished humanity with it. In another, he remained bound, allowed the Imperium to rot, but preserved a fragile path forward. Neither outcome was victory, both were compromise. The Emperor had never intended to rule forever from a throne of suffering, but he also had not intended to become humanity's executioner. The Grey Knights felt the pressure ease, slightly. Enough to breathe, enough to survive. Their Grand Master spoke again, voice trembling but unbroken. He did not plead, he did not command, he reminded. He spoke of purpose, of sacrifice, of endurance, of a war not won by annihilation, but by survival long enough to adapt. His words were not for the custodes, they were for the Emperor himself. The Emperor withdrew, microns, moments, fractions of intent, but the effect was immediate. Systems stabilized, the Astronomicon steadied, warp currents recoiled reluctantly. The throne's screaming softened into a low, agonized hum. The Grey Knights collapsed as one, their psychic lattice dissolving, many unconscious, some dead, all scarred beyond recovery. The Emperor settled back into stillness. But something had changed. He had moved, and now the galaxy knew it was possible. Silence returned to the Imperial Palace, but it was no longer the silence of stasis. It was the silence that followed a near catastrophe, heavy with awareness and irrevocable change. The Golden Throne still hummed, its ancient system stabilizing, but the sound had altered, lower, strained, wounded. The Emperor remained bound, yet the chamber itself felt different, as if reality now understood how close it had come to breaking. Across Terra, the death toll finalized itself in grim waves. Astropathic choirs lay dead in their sanctums, bodies reduced to scorched husks. Navigational towers went dark, their operators driven mad or rendered blind. Entire regions of the planet experienced psychic aftershocks, citizens collapsing in streets, machinery malfunctioning, sacred reliquaries cracking without explanation. Officially, nothing had happened. Unofficially, Terra had felt its god attempt to stand. The custodes stood in solemn silence around the throne. They did not speak of what they had witnessed. Their duty was protection, not interpretation. Yet even they could not deny the truth carved into their instincts. The Emperor was no longer entirely dormant. His will had moved with intent, not reflex. For the first time in 10,000 years, he had acted not in survival, but in judgment. The Grey Knights were removed quietly. Those who lived were taken back to Titan under maximum warding, their minds scarred, their souls burned raw by proximity to something no mortal was meant to oppose. Many would never fight again, some would never speak. All of them now carried a secret heavier than any daemon's true name. They had stopped the Emperor of mankind and lived. Within the Imperium, the shock waves spread slower but deeper. Warp storms recoiled from Sol as if burned. Demonic incursions faltered mid-manifestation. Entire covens of sorcerers across the galaxy collapsed as their rituals unraveled without warning. For a brief, terrifying moment, the Chaos Gods felt something they had not experienced since the siege of Terra. Not pain, not fear, but interruption. A pressure had brushed against the warp that did not belong to it. They understood immediately. The Emperor had not awakened. He had tested his chains. This realization sent ripples through the traitor legions. Prophets screamed conflicting visions, warp auguries fractured. Some warbands fell into panic, others into fanatic devotion, believing the end times imminent. Abaddon himself felt the shift, a tightening behind reality, a presence reasserting itself. The long war did not end that day, but it changed shape. The enemy was no longer purely absent. It was restrained and watching. Within the Emperor's mind, time did not pass normally. He processed outcomes at a scale no mortal could comprehend. The futures he had glimpsed were still there, branching endlessly, each demanding sacrifice. His attempt to leave the throne confirmed what he already suspected. His freedom would be absolute and absolutely catastrophic. Humanity was not ready. The Imperium was not ready. The galaxy itself was not ready. But neither could things continue unchanged. The throne was failing. That truth was now undeniable. Its systems had endured far beyond their intended limits, but entropy was inevitable. One day, willingly or not, the Emperor would be forced to move again. The question was no longer if, but when and under what conditions. That knowledge altered his strategy. Subtle adjustments began immediately. Not commands, not proclamations, but pressure, nudges applied across probability and perception. Certain individuals survived battles they should not have. Others died at precisely the wrong moment. Faith intensified in some regions, fractured in others. The Emperor did not intervene openly, he recalibrated. The Grey Knights became a contingency, not a last resort. Their role expanded silently. New doctrines were written and sealed, new wards devised, not against chaos, but against divinity unbound. The unthinkable had become protocol. Somewhere in the deepest vaults of Titan, weapons were conceptualized that would never be spoken of, designed not to kill a god, but to delay one. On Terra, the Golden Throne endured. The Emperor remained seated, unmoving to external observation. To the Imperium, nothing had changed. The Astronomicon still burned. The Imperium still warred. Humanity still suffered forward through blood and ignorance. But the galaxy itself had felt the shift. Reality now remembered what it meant for the Emperor to act, and when he tried again, because he would, the universe would not be caught unprepared.
Far from Terra, beyond the reach of conventional astropaths and censored imperial record, the consequences of the Emperor's failed ascent began to surface in places never meant to feel his presence. The Imperium had always believed its god was distant, entombed, a lighthouse rather than a blade. That illusion fractured quietly, like a hairline crack spreading through ancient stone. On Titan, the Grey Knights endured judgment. Not from the Inquisition, nor from the High Lords of Terra, but from themselves. Survivors of the throne chamber were sealed within null sanctums, subjected to rites older than the chapter's founding. Their armor was stripped away, not as punishment, but as containment. The psychic residue clinging to them was volatile, echoes of a will vast enough to scar reality itself. Librarians recorded impossible readings, thoughts that were not memories, emotions that did not belong to human minds, fragments of intention still burning behind their eyes. They had not faced a demon. They had faced purpose. Grand Master Voldus convened the chapter in secrecy deeper than any conclave before it. The air within the Hall of Purity was cold, sterile, threaded with hexagrammic wards that hummed faintly in protest. Every knight present understood the gravity without explanation. This was not a discussion of chaos. This was contingency planning for divinity. The ancient texts were unsealed. Tomes sealed since the aftermath of the Horus heresy were laid bare, records written in cipher and contradiction, detailing the Emperor not as savior, but as variable, a being whose will could not be allowed to act unchecked, even in the name of survival. The Grey Knights had been created to oppose the warp, but now they faced a truth that redefined their existence. If the Emperor rose before the galaxy was ready, he could unmake everything he had fought to protect. Preparation began immediately. Across the Imperium Nihilus, strange patterns emerged. Entire war zones experienced moments of absolute stillness, bolter fire freezing mid-discharge, vox transmissions cutting into dead silence, warp manifestations faltering as if reality itself hesitated. These moments never lasted more than seconds, but they were enough to change outcomes. Victories tipped unexpectedly, defeats turned survivable. Commanders reported an overwhelming sensation of being observed, measured, then released. No official explanation was offered. Chaos felt it too. Within the Eye of Terror, demonic hierarchies convulsed as ancient balances shifted. The Emperor's attempt had not been an awakening, but it had been enough to remind the warp of something it despised. The Chaos Gods did not panic, but they adjusted. Schemes spanning millennia were recalculated. Certain champions were elevated prematurely. Others were discarded without warning. The long war accelerated, not toward victory, but toward inevitability. Abaddon the Despoiler sensed it with unsettling clarity. The War Master did not fear the Emperor, but he understood consequence. The galaxy had survived 10,000 years because the Emperor was static. A living god who chose to remain bound was predictable. One who began to test his limits was not. Abaddon ordered a restructuring of Black Legion priorities, shifting resources towards soul-adjacent systems, not for assault, but for observation. If the Emperor moved again, the traitor legions intended to be ready. On Terra, the High Lords noticed anomalies, but dismissed them as system fatigue. Only one among them understood the truth. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes returned to the throne chamber alone, standing before the Emperor in absolute silence. No prayer was offered, no words spoken. There was no need. The Custodes had felt the shift as deeply as the Grey Knights. Their gene-crafted instincts recognized it as they would recognize a drawn blade. The Emperor was no longer simply enduring. He was planning. In his fractured consciousness, the Emperor recalculated humanity's future with renewed urgency. The failed ascent had confirmed that force alone would not save the Imperium. Control had to be subtler, faith had to be sharpened into a weapon, not allowed to metastasize into blind fanaticism. The ecclesiastical excesses were now variables to be managed, not tolerated. Heroes would be elevated, martyrs selected, symbols curated with deliberate intent. The Golden Throne groaned softly, ancient systems compensating for stress they were never designed to endure. Each passing year narrowed the window. When the Emperor moved again, he would not test the chains. He would break them, or ensure someone else bore the cost. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Grey Knights prepared for a duty that would never be spoken aloud, to stand between humanity and its God, should salvation itself become extinction. The first open reaction did not come from Terra, nor from Titan, but from the far edges of the Imperium where faith burned hottest and oversight was weakest. Shrines began to report visions, identical ones, emerging independently across light years. A throne of fire, a shadow rising behind it, a voice that did not speak yet demanded obedience. These were not warp dreams. They carried weight, coherence, and consequence. The ecclesiarchy took notice. Cardinals convened emergency synods, declaring the visions a sign of imminent revelation. Pilgrimages surged. Entire populations abandoned manufactorums and defense posts, marching towards sacred sites in desperate hope of witnessing the emperor's return. The administratum attempted suppression through revised tide demands and ration controls, but belief moved faster than bureaucracy ever could. The emperor's presence, subtle yet undeniable, had sharpened faith into something dangerous. The Grey Knights watched these developments with growing alarm. Faith had always been a tool against chaos, but uncontrolled belief could empower the warp just as easily as it could resist it. The Emperor's new influence was precise, but humanity's reaction was not. Librarians traced psychic harmonics threading through the population, mapping how belief reshaped probability. They discovered a disturbing truth. The Emperor was not amplifying worship, he was selecting it. Certain cult movements collapsed overnight, their leaders struck by sudden madness or execution-level scrutiny. Others flourished unnaturally, spreading with logistical efficiency that defied coincidence. Saints emerged whose miracles were clean, contained, and strategically useful. The Emperor was curating his image, pruning excess, refining purpose. He was not awakening to rule. He was preparing humanity to survive his movement. Chaos responded with calculated brutality. The word-bearers launched coordinated desecrations against key shrine worlds, seeking to destabilize the Emperor's emerging symbolic network. Entire cathedral cities were annihilated in ritualized massacres, their deaths meant to poison belief and fracture cohesion. The Night Lords followed, targeting pilgrimage fleets, turning faith into terror with surgical cruelty. Each act was designed not to defeat the Imperium militarily, but to destabilize the Emperor's growing psychic architecture. Abaddon observed all of it with cold restraint. He did not join the frenzy. Instead, he diverted assets to secure ancient relics tied to the Emperor's early conquests, artifacts forged before the heresy, steeped in a version of the Emperor that predated worship. Abaddon understood that if the Emperor rose empowered by faith, then severing that faith at its roots might weaken him in ways force never could. The long war shifted from conquest to disruption. On Terra, the Custodes felt the strain deepen. The Golden Throne demanded increasing energy input, its ancient mechanisms compensating for stresses beyond mechanical limits. The Emperor's will pressed outward more frequently now, not violently, but persistently. The Custodes adjusted their rotations, their internal disciplines tightening. They no longer guarded a static relic, they guarded a pressure point holding reality together. One custodian collapsed during a silent vigil. No wound marked his armor, no psychic scream echoed through the chamber. His body simply failed, overwhelmed by proximity to a will no longer dormant. His death was sealed, recorded, and never spoken of again. But it confirmed what the Grey Knights already feared. The Emperor's containment was eroding at a biological level. Within the Emperor's consciousness, paths narrowed. He saw futures where he rose fully and annihilated chaos along with half of humanity. He saw others where he remained bound until the throne failed catastrophically, tearing a wound in reality too vast to seal. Neither outcome was acceptable. The only viable solution required preparation at a galactic scale, shaping humanity into something resilient enough to survive divine proximity. That meant conflict. Not open war, but selective catastrophe. Worlds would burn to hearten belief. Heroes would fall to inspire resolve. Entire systems would be sacrificed to teach humanity endurance without reliance. The Emperor did not mourn these outcomes. He accounted for them. The Grey Knights realized the final truth too late to stop it. Their role was no longer simply containment, they were becoming arbiters of acceptable survival. If the Emperor crossed certain thresholds, if his preparations threatened extinction-level consequence, they would be required to act again, not to restrain him physically, but to disrupt his strategy. The idea was heresy, the necessity was absolute. As faith spread, chaos adapted, and the throne strained under invisible weight, the galaxy entered a phase no prophecy had fully captured. The Emperor had not risen, he had leaned forward, and the universe was learning what that meant. The preparations on Titan crossed a threshold no Grey Knight had ever hoped to reach. What began as contingency doctrine hardened into operational certainty. The Emperor's pressure on reality was no longer theoretical, it had measurable consequences, and those consequences were accelerating. The chapter's librarius compiled probability lattices showing an unavoidable convergence point, an event horizon where restraint would no longer be an option. The Grey Knights would be forced to intervene again, this time not reactively. Deep beneath Titan's surface, vaults sealed since the earliest days of the Imperium were opened under layers of null warding and soul-binding sigils. These were not weapons in the conventional sense. They were concepts given form, devices designed to interfere with causality, belief, and psychic coherence itself. Their purpose was singular, to delay a god without killing him, to fracture intention without collapsing reality. Such tools carried unbearable risk. Even proximity to these relics caused servitors to fail and human attendants to bleed from the eyes. The Grey Knights endured through discipline alone, their gene-forged resilience strained against artifacts never meant to coexist with mortal minds. Each activation simulation ended the same way, success followed by unacceptable loss. Entire strike teams erased from existence, localized reality collapse, temporal echo contamination. Yet the calculations remained clear. Doing nothing would be worse. Across the galaxy, the Emperor's influence grew more refined. Faith movements aligned with imperial survival prospered unnaturally, while destabilizing cults were extinguished through coincidence and misfortune. The result was not unity, but sharpening polarity. Humanity grew more resolute, but also more brittle. The Imperium became less flexible, more absolute in belief. That rigidity worried the Grey Knights more than chaos ever had. Rigid systems break. Chaos adapted with predatory intelligence. The Thousand Sons launched covert operations targeting psyker populations tied to the Emperor's emerging psychic architecture. Their goal was not conquest, but corruption, introducing subtle warp distortions that would amplify instability when the Emperor next exerted pressure. The Alpha Legion infiltrated pilgrimage routes, seeding disinformation designed to fracture faith at critical moments. Chaos did not seek to stop the Emperor, it sought to ensure his next movement would be catastrophic. Abaddon approved these strategies without revealing his full intent. The Despoiler's visions had grown sharper since the Emperor's attempt. He saw a future where the Emperor rose and burned the galaxy clean, leaving nothing for chaos to rule. He also saw futures where intervention fractured the Imperium beyond repair. Abaddon chose the third path, force the Emperor to hesitate, prolong uncertainty, let decay do what war could not. On Terra, the Golden Throne approached a silent crisis. Its systems compensated endlessly, drawing power from sources that had not existed when it was built. Sacrificial psyker tithe numbers increased quietly. Entire black ships vanished from record to meet escalating demand. The Emperor did not ask for this. The Imperium provided it instinctively, driven by fear of what would happen if the throne failed. Within his consciousness, the Emperor recognized the danger of his own momentum. Each subtle intervention increased dependency. Each correction trained humanity to rely on divine calibration rather than adaptation. The Emperor saw the pattern repeating, another form of stagnation, different from the one he had sought to escape, but equally fatal. If he moved too carefully, humanity would fossilize around his will. If he moved too forcefully, it would be annihilated. There was no clean solution. The Grey Knights identified the breaking point first. Their models converged on a future moment where the Emperor would attempt a partial disengagement from the throne, less dramatic than his first test, but far more dangerous. Not a rise, but a redistribution of presence, a projection of will that would stretch his bindings thin enough to snap if disrupted incorrectly. At that moment, intervention would be mandatory. Plans were finalized, strike teams assigned, relics calibrated, fail-safes layered upon fail-safes. Every Grey Knight involved understood the cost. Survival was unlikely, success uncertain, damnation guaranteed in the eyes of history. Their names were already being erased from record. They accepted it without hesitation, because the alternative was worse. The galaxy stood balanced between two catastrophes, a god unleashed or a god eternally bound until collapse. The Grey Knights existed in the narrowing space between those outcomes, tasked with committing an act that would never be forgiven, never be known, and might not even succeed. Far above Terra, the Astronomicon burned steadily. To the Imperium, it was business as usual. War continued, faith endured, humanity pressed forward in ignorance. But beneath the surface of reality itself, gears shifted. The Emperor was approaching another decision point, and this time, the galaxy would not survive indecision.
The Imperial Palace had grown quiet, but it was the calm that precedes rupture. Within the Golden Throne chamber, the Emperor's will coiled like a living storm, restrained but impatient. Every ancient servo, every sacred conduit, every living custodian and machine-bound servitor was pressed to the edge of endurance. The Emperor had tested his chains twice, subtly and openly, and each test revealed the same truth. The galaxy was unprepared, but restraint could not endure forever. The Grey Knights had reached their limit. Vaults beneath Titan hummed with artifacts that defied comprehension, psychic instruments designed to delay a god without harming him. Today, they would activate them.
Strike squads, each meticulously chosen for resilience and discipline, descended in silence. The air itself seemed to resist their presence, thick with residual pressure of divine intent. Each knight knew that this mission was likely final. Their survival was secondary to reality itself. Grandmaster Voldus spoke no words. His presence alone anchored the operation. Formation was absolute. Shields of interlocking psychic energy began to radiate outward from each knight, layered with spells of suppression and containment older than the mechanicum itself. Servitors monitored energy flow and stability, their data feeds fracturing under the strain, but the Grey Knights ignored it. To hesitate was to court oblivion. Within the throne chamber, the Emperor stirred, not violently, not with rage, but with the deliberate calculation of one who has endured millennia of stasis. His consciousness expanded outward, probing, testing, weighing consequences. He felt the Grey Knights preparing, recognized their intent, and allowed the test to continue. To intervene preemptively would be to impose his will on unready minds. Patience was a choice as sharp as any blade. As the relics activated, reality itself shuddered. Systems in the Golden Throne screamed, mechanical joints grinding against impossible stress. Psychic energy flared in waves, coiling and snapping, reshaping local space-time in subtle, disorienting ways. The chamber was a storm rendered visible. Sparks of raw force danced along conduits, shadows stretched into impossible angles, and even the floor appeared to pulse under pressure. Each knight became both anchor and lightning rod, their psychic lattice distributing the strain to prevent catastrophic collapse. Outside the palace, warp currents reacted violently. Minor demon incursions flared and dissolved simultaneously, caught between raw psychic tension and the Emperor's latent will. Navigators screamed mid-transition, starships trembled in orbit, and astropathic networks across Terra flickered in pain and ecstasy. None of this reached the public eye. Officially, the Imperium functioned normally. Unofficially, a cataclysmic negotiation was unfolding at the scale of stars. The Emperor adjusted subtly. He did not resist in full, nor did he surrender. Each movement, each minor shift in his presence was calculated to test the Grey Knight's lattice. He measured their strength, their limits, their resolve. He felt the risk to reality, but also the potential to teach. The Imperium had been preserved too long by stasis, and sometimes preservation required pressure. His restraint was a lesson imposed with precision. Hours, or what felt like hours in warped temporal perception, passed. Minor fractures appeared, servitors failing, energy conduits melting, knights screaming in psychic overload, yet the lattice held. Each failure was absorbed, distributed, and counterbalanced. The Emperor observed all, recording, calibrating, preparing for the next phase. He understood the inevitability of intervention, the need for risk, and the limits of human endurance. When the relics finally reached peak activation, a pause occurred, a moment of equilibrium. The Emperor's presence recoiled slightly, allowing the lattice to stabilize without collapse. He had tested them, they had proven capable, and yet the chamber bore the marks of strain that would last millennia. Scorched floors, fractured conduits, psychic echoes that would haunt the minds of all present forever. Grandmaster Voldus allowed himself a single nod. Survival had not been guaranteed. Catastrophe had been avoided, but the mission was only the beginning. The Emperor's will had not been curtailed. It had been measured. And somewhere in the silent shadows of the throne chamber, a truth lingered. The next attempt might not allow compromise. The Golden Throne chamber had become a crucible. The air quivered with unspent psychic tension, ancient machinery groaning under impossible strain. Sparks flew along conduits that had survived millennia, and the faint hum of the throne became a low, resonant roar vibrating through stone, ceramite, and flesh alike. The Emperor's will pulsed outward like a tidal wave held in check, brushing the minds of all present, testing limits and endurance. Every custodian, every servitor, every Grey Knight present felt it in the marrow of their bones, the very essence of time and space bending under his latent energy.
The chamber was no longer merely a seat of preservation, it was a battlefield of potentiality. Grandmaster Voldus stepped forward, his silver armor etched with wards that glowed faintly red in the low, oppressive light. His eyes scanned the lattice of psychic barriers his knights had woven, measuring stress points, predicting fractures before they occurred. They were attempting the impossible, to restrain the Emperor without annihilating him, to hold the galaxy's fragile stability while engaging directly with a consciousness vast enough to collapse reality itself. Each knight was a node, each spell a chain link, and each heartbeat a calculation against catastrophe. Failure would not be contained within this chamber, it would ripple across the stars. The Emperor moved subtly, imperceptibly at first, a shift in thought that radiated like a tremor through the lattice. His consciousness did not lash out, it probed, it observed. Every pattern, every mental construct of the Grey Knights, every minute variation in psychic strength was catalogued. He felt their resolve and tested it. Some knights screamed internally, their minds straining under psychic backlash. Others collapsed partially into unconsciousness, only to have the lattice redistribute energy to preserve the formation. It was not war, it was measurement. It was a negotiation conducted at the scale of gods and mortals intertwined, with no room for error. Outside the throne chamber, the consequences began to manifest. Astropathic links flared across the Imperium, searing through minds unprepared to receive such magnitude of psychic disturbance. Pilgrimage worlds reported visions of impossible scale, fires that moved like liquid, thrones of molten gold, the shadow of a god stretching across the horizon. Not all interpretations were literal. Some priests reported feelings, certainty, and terror simultaneously that could alter entire planetary populations without a single physical act. The Emperor's influence had become a force of both subtlety and destruction, shaping perception itself to prepare humanity for events no one could yet comprehend. Within the chamber, the lattice began to falter in microbursts. The Grey Knights felt micro-fractures in psychic cohesion, small enough to be corrected, yet enough to indicate the enormity of what they faced. One strike team activated a containment relic beneath the floor, an artifact older than recorded history, radiating psychic energy so pure and alien it burned their minds even as it stabilized the lattice. Another knight's shield flared bright crimson, its light throwing the chamber into deep chiaroscuro shadows, highlighting the impossibility of holding back a god with mortal constructs. Every action required perfect timing. Every hesitation could cascade into irreversible collapse. The Emperor sensed the correction. He did not resist violently, but he adjusted. His will now flowed like liquid metal, slipping into every weak point, testing, teasing, bending the lattice without breaking it entirely. He understood that the Grey Knights' intervention was not defiance, it was guidance imposed upon themselves by duty. And in a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, he allowed a single strain to persist, letting the chamber register the stress of his presence in full, a warning, a lesson. Grandmaster Voldus responded instantly, issuing silent commands through psychic resonance. Nodes of energy pulsed, redirected, recalibrated. The lattice shivered, but held. Knights collapsed into unconsciousness only to be raised by neighboring nodes, energy cascading through the formation like a controlled avalanche. The Emperor watched all of it, understanding limits and patience, aware of what the consequences of a single miscalculation would mean: planetary destruction, astropathic collapse, and potential rupture in the Astronomicon itself. After what felt like hours, a fragile equilibrium emerged. Sparks still flew, machinery groaned, psychic energy hummed through every stone, but the lattice endured. The Emperor's presence receded subtly, allowing the chamber to stabilize without collapse. Grandmaster Voldus surveyed the aftermath, a dozen knights unconscious, multiple artifacts nearly destroyed, machinery glowing hot from strain, but survival achieved. The Emperor had not been stopped, nor had he moved beyond restraint. Instead, a negotiation had occurred at a scale that no living being could fully comprehend. Humanity had survived, reality had endured, but the warning was clear: Next time, failure might be unavoidable. In the quiet aftermath, the Grey Knights exhaled collectively, their psychic connection unraveling, yet the sense of vigilance remained. The Emperor's will was measured now, understood. The lattice would require recalibration, the chamber repairs would last months, and the psychic echoes would haunt all present indefinitely. But the first direct intervention had succeeded. Humanity had been preserved again. And somewhere, beneath layers of divine calculation, the Emperor had taken note, an acknowledgement, not defeat, that would shape the galaxy's future in ways unseen.
The throne chamber shook with a pressure so immense it defied comprehension. Sparks arced across conduits, machines groaning under the psychic load, and the very air itself shimmered with tension, thick as molten metal. The Emperor's presence pressed outward with deliberate intent, testing every knot of psychic resistance woven by the Grey Knights. This was no longer measurement, it was a confrontation. Every knight knew the moment had arrived, the threshold between containment and catastrophe. Failure was not an option. Success was a temporary reprieve in a game of divine scales, where one wrong movement could fracture reality. Grandmaster Voldus raised his hand, a silent command to the strike squads. Their psychic lattice began to pulse rhythmically, an interlocking network of energy and ritual that coiled around the Emperor's expanding will. Every knight acted as both anchor and conductor, their bodies straining, minds burning with a force no mortal mind could endure. Servitors monitored the ancient machinery, but even they could not fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The Emperor's intent was measured, precise, yet overwhelmingly vast. Each flicker of his awareness radiated like a tidal wave across the chamber, testing not just containment, but the very endurance of the human mind. The Emperor stirred subtly, a movement almost imperceptible at first. His will shifted, probing the lattice, slipping into gaps with the finesse of an entity who had calculated millennia. One knight screamed internally, his psychic shield overloading, arcs of crimson energy searing across the chamber. Another collapsed halfway, only to be absorbed into the lattice by neighboring nodes, redistributing strain to prevent collapse. The chamber became a living organism of psychic energy, pulsing and breathing with a rhythm dictated by both mortal and godlike intent. Outside the throne, the effects were immediate and terrifying. Astropathic conduits burned out, Vox transmissions screamed with static, and minor warp incursions flared before vanishing mid-materialization. Pilgrims across distant worlds reported visions of impossible scale, a throne of molten gold, a shadowed figure stretching across horizons, fires that moved as though alive. These were not the visions of the warp, they were extensions of the Emperor's presence, subtle calibrations of influence, shaping belief to prepare humanity for what was to come. Faith sharpened into both weapon and shield, and the Imperium unknowingly bent to the will of its bound god. Within the chamber, cracks began to appear, minor fractures in the lattice, tiny but significant. Grandmaster Voldus countered instantly, recalibrating, redistributing energy, and reinforcing critical nodes. The Grey Knight's psychic shields flared in crimson and gold, throwing the chamber into chiaroscuro extremes. Sparks flew from machinery as the lattice hummed and twisted, and for a moment reality seemed to bend. One knight collapsed completely, unconscious, his mind scarred beyond recognition, but the lattice held. The Emperor watched, allowed the strain, and measured endurance, each failure teaching him something about mortal resilience and the limits of human discipline. Time itself became fluid. Minutes stretched into subjective eternities. The chamber vibrated with psychic resonance so dense that even the stone walls seemed to pulse. Servitors overloaded, their monitoring instruments shattered, and ancient machinery groaned, emitting sparks and smoke. Every pulse of the Emperor's will radiated outward, testing containment, teaching, calibrating. The Grey Knights did not falter. They could not. Each knight bore more than just the weight of their duty. They carried the fate of the Imperium itself.
Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a fragile equilibrium emerged. The lattice stabilized, the Emperor's will recoiled slightly, and the throne's machinery emitted a deep, resonant hum rather than a scream. The Grey Knights collapsed where they stood, some unconscious, others breathing shallowly, but the mission had succeeded, not by defeating the Emperor, but by surviving him, measuring him, and maintaining fragile cosmic order. The Emperor's presence remained bound, yet subtly altered. He had learned, and so had the galaxy. Grandmaster Voldus allowed himself a nod, unspoken acknowledgement of both success and warning. This was only the beginning. The Emperor's movement had been observed, measured, and survived, but next time the cost might be beyond mortal calculation. The throne, the Grey Knights, the Custodes, the galaxy itself, everything was now poised on the edge of a decision that could not be reversed. Humanity had been preserved, but the warning was clear. The Emperor would move again, and when he did, the universe would feel it. The galaxy trembled in silence as if holding its breath. From Terra, the golden throne radiated a subtle, almost imperceptible pulse, a signal that rippled through psychic networks, astropathic channels, and even warp currents. The Emperor had begun a maneuver unlike any before, not a rise, not an awakening, but a deliberate projection of influence, testing the Imperium and the Grey Knights alike. Each pulse carried weight, each fluctuation threatened collapse. Within the throne chamber, machinery groaned, sparks hissed, and ancient conduits strained against energies they had never been designed to bear. The air shimmered with psychic tension, heavy and viscous, pressing upon all who dared enter its sphere. Grandmaster Voldus and the Grey Knights moved with the precision of death incarnate. Their formation was no longer defensive, it was strategic, anticipatory. Each knight held nodes of interlocking psychic energy, their shields forming a lattice designed not to repel, but to absorb, redirect, and endure. Servitors monitored every fluctuation, every pulse, feeding information into predictive models that calculated survival in increments of milliseconds. Even with meticulous preparation, failure was imminent in any deviation. The Emperor was testing limits that no human mind should endure, pushing the lattice to its brink, probing for weaknesses. The Emperor's presence flowed like molten steel through the chamber, coiling and uncoiling, subtle yet all-encompassing. He did not lash out, he did not scream. His will was deliberate, a slow-moving tidal force that reshaped perception, bent time, and threaded through every conscious mind present. One knight screamed internally as a psychic shockwave ricocheted across his shield, forcing him to collapse halfway into unconsciousness. Another strained under feedback loops, the lattice momentarily destabilizing until neighboring nodes corrected it with lightning precision. The chamber had become a living organism, breathing and pulsating with the interplay of God and mortal discipline. Outside the throne, consequences manifested catastrophically, yet subtly. Astropathic networks burned, their links screaming in psychic overload. Navigators collapsed mid-transit, starships trembling as if the very fabric of space were stretching. Across pilgrimage worlds, millions witnessed impossible visions, molten golden thrones, shadows stretching beyond horizons, fire that moved with intent. Faith transformed into both weapon and shield, bending the will of entire planetary populations to prepare for what no mortal had seen. This was the Emperor shaping reality itself, calibrating belief and imposing lessons through terror and awe simultaneously. Within the chamber, the lattice began to fray in microbursts. Sparks erupted along conduits, machinery hissed and groaned, and psychic energy flared bright crimson before being absorbed and redistributed. Grandmaster Voldus anticipated each fracture, issuing silent commands that rippled through the psychic formation. Knights fell unconscious, only to be raised by neighboring nodes, the lattice flexing like a living muscle, straining to contain a god. One relic, activated beneath the throne, emitted an unearthly light, forcing the Emperor's awareness to adjust, testing their resolve further. Every movement was precise, every breath measured against the risk of total collapse.
The Emperor observed and adapted. He did not counter directly, but allowed subtle strains to persist, ensuring that the Grey Knights felt the full weight of their duty. He tested their limits, measured their resolve, and calibrated the flow of his will to observe how mortals could endure proximity to divinity. His presence was no longer a static force, it was dynamic, interactive, almost sentient in its methodical pressure. Each pulse taught him something about human endurance, each micro-fracture revealed the capacity for survival, and every psychic scream marked an iteration in a trial that spanned millennia in intent. Finally, a precarious equilibrium emerged. The lattice held, sparks still flew, machinery groaned, psychic energy pulsed through stone and ceramic, yet collapse had been avoided. The Emperor's will receded slightly, allowing stabilization without catastrophic rupture. Knights collapsed where they stood, some unconscious, some gasping, yet alive. Survival had been measured, endurance recorded, and the galaxy remained intact. For now, the Emperor had projected his will, tested it, and allowed the Imperium to respond without annihilation. But the warning was clear. Next time, the window for failure would be narrower, the stakes absolute. Grand Master Voldus surveyed the aftermath with silent acknowledgement. The Emperor's presence had been both teacher and tormentor. The lattice had survived, but at tremendous cost, physical, psychic, and temporal. This was a rehearsal of inevitability, a proof that mortals could intervene, but only barely. The Imperium had survived, reality had endured, and humanity had been tempered once again. The Emperor's intent remained unbroken, his influence growing, his tests far from complete. The future now hung on razor edges, poised between divine motion and mortal endurance. The throne chamber had become a crucible of fate. Psychic energy flowed like molten steel, arcs of crimson and gold illuminating the twisted machinery and scorched floors. Sparks leapt from conduits overloaded beyond millennia of design, each one searing the air with the smell of ozone and melting ceramite. The Emperor's will, previously restrained, now radiated outward in concentrated pulses, testing the limits of mortal and mechanical endurance alike. Grand Master Voldus felt it pressing against his mind like the weight of a collapsing star. Every breath in the chamber was a calculated risk, each heartbeat a battle against psychic rupture. The Grey Knights moved with precision born of discipline and desperation. Strike teams adjusted their positions, shields flaring in interlocking patterns of crimson light, psychic nodes vibrating with the effort of containing a god. Servitors monitored fluctuations, but even they could not register the full magnitude of what they contained. The Emperor's presence was fluid, intelligent, and deliberate. He allowed cracks to open only to correct them, testing their coordination and resolve. One knight's psychic shield flared violently, arcs of energy whipping through the chamber, forcing nearby knights to redistribute strain instantaneously. Another collapsed halfway, unconscious, only to have energy redirected through the lattice to preserve the overall structure. Outside the chamber, the Imperium began to feel the strain in ways subtle and terrifying. Astropathic networks overloaded, screaming in psychic resonance. Navigators collapsed mid-transition. Starships quivered in orbit, and entire pilgrimage worlds were bathed in impossible visions, molten thrones stretching across the horizon, shadows of godlike figures bending reality, fire moving as if alive. This was the Emperor calibrating humanity, shaping belief and perception simultaneously, preparing the Imperium for consequences that no mortal mind could yet grasp. Faith became a weapon, a shield, and a channel through which divine presence flowed into the galaxy. Within the chamber, the lattice began to show microfractures, minor yet significant. Sparks erupted from machinery, psychic nodes quivered, and energy flared. Grand Master Voldus reacted instantly, sending silent commands through psychic resonance. Knights collapsed, their consciousnesses threatened by overload, but the lattice redistributed strain, absorbing failure to prevent catastrophic rupture. One ancient relic activated beneath the throne radiated alien energy, forcing the Emperor to adjust subtly. Each microfracture became a lesson, a test, a measure of endurance for both mortal and god alike.
The Emperor responded with deliberate subtlety. He did not attack, he did not surrender. He allowed the Grey Knights to feel the pressure of his presence, to bear the weight of proximity to divinity, while simultaneously testing their limits. Time warped in the chamber. Minutes became subjective eternities as energy pulsed, flowed, and recoiled. Servitors failed, machinery groaned, and every psychic echo reverberated like the scream of creation itself. The Emperor's projection was precise, yet terrifyingly expansive, coiling through reality and consciousness alike. Then came the moment of inevitable sacrifice. Grand Master Voldus signaled the ultimate maneuver. A strike team of the most resilient Grey Knights advanced to the central lattice nodes, carrying relics and focusing psychic energy in a calculated cascade designed to temporarily suppress the Emperor's will. The effect was immediate. Sparks erupted, conduits hissed, and psychic energy coalesced into violent arcs. Knights screamed internally, their consciousnesses pushed to the brink, yet they held. Each knight knew the cost: unconsciousness, permanent psychic scarring, even death, but the alternative was annihilation on a galactic scale. The Emperor shifted in response, not in anger, but in recognition. The lattice strain persisted, but his will adjusted, bending without breaking, allowing the knight's intervention to succeed marginally. Sparks illuminated faces locked in pain and determination, shadows twisting unnaturally across machinery scarred by energy surges. For a fleeting moment, mortal will and divine presence collided, the chamber a nexus of impossible scale and consequence. Then, just as abruptly, a fragile equilibrium emerged. Sparks still flew, machinery groaned, knights collapsed partially, yet consciousness endured. Grand Master Voldus allowed himself a nod. The Emperor had been measured, the lattice survived, and humanity remained intact. But the warning was unmistakable. The next projection, the next movement, could exceed mortal endurance. The Grey Knights had acted, survived, and ensured continuity, but only barely. The Imperium had been preserved, yet at tremendous cost. The throne strained under invisible weight, and the galaxy itself remained poised on the edge of irrevocable consequence. The Emperor projected, observed, and tested. The Grey Knights had responded, endured, and survived. The balance was tenuous, and the future, shaped by God and mortals alike, was now poised on the knife edge of inevitability.
The throne chamber was a cathedral of tension, every shadow thick with the weight of imminent catastrophe. Sparks licked along ancient conduits, machinery groaning under forces it had endured for millennia, and the very air shimmered, heavy with psychic resonance. The Emperor's will now surged outward deliberately, testing the lattice's endurance at its most extreme, probing weaknesses while maintaining a terrifying equilibrium. Each pulse was measured, a wave of divine intent that bent perception, warped time, and brushed against every conscious mind present. The Grey Knights knew they were approaching a point of no return. Their intervention had become a necessity rather than an option. Grand Master Voldus led the final sequence. The most resilient strike teams moved toward central lattice nodes, each carrying relics older than the Imperium itself, designed to concentrate psychic energy in precise, destructive arcs. These devices were not conventional weapons. They were instruments of containment, capable of redirecting divine force without destroying it. Yet no human mind could endure their operation without suffering. Knights braced themselves, psychic shields flaring, weaving energy in interlocking patterns, each pulse synchronized to the Emperor's subtle movements. Servitors monitored the conduits, but even they could not fully register the magnitude of energy flowing through the chamber. The Emperor's presence flowed like molten metal, fluid yet unyielding. He did not lash out, he did not resist violently. Instead, he observed, measured, and allowed subtle strains to persist, forcing the Grey Knights to experience the full breadth of proximity to divinity. One knight collapsed into unconsciousness as psychic backlash tore through his shield, arcs of crimson energy slicing across the chamber. Another strained violently under feedback loops, barely maintained by neighboring nodes redistributing energy. Sparks hissed, machines groaned, and every heartbeat carried the potential to either stabilize or annihilate. The chamber had become a living entity, breathing in the tension between God and mortal discipline. Outside the throne, the Imperium experienced consequences that were both subtle and devastating. Astropathic networks flared, screams of psychic overload echoing across light years. Navigators collapsed mid-transition, starships quivering in orbit, while pilgrimage worlds reported visions of impossible scale. Molten thrones stretching across horizons, shadows of godlike figures bending reality, fire moving with deliberate intent. Faith became a weapon, a shield, and a conduit for the Emperor's influence. Humanity itself was being calibrated, tested, and tempered, unknowingly participating in a rehearsal of inevitability on a cosmic scale. Within the chamber, microfractures multiplied, sparks erupted from conduits, psychic nodes pulsed erratically, and energy flared bright crimson before being redistributed through the lattice. Grandmaster Voldus directed instantaneous corrections, each knight acting in perfect synchrony, sustaining the lattice against failure. One ancient relic, now glowing with alien light, forced the Emperor to subtly adjust his presence, acknowledging the mortal defiance and endurance. Every microfracture, every arc of energy, every scream was both a lesson and a test, a measure of human resilience against divine will. Then came the ultimate sacrifice. Voldus signaled the Central Strike Team to push the lattice beyond safe operational thresholds. Knights advanced, shields flaring, relics activated in perfect sequence. Sparks lanced through the chamber, conduits groaned, and psychic energy coalesced into violent arcs. Internal screams were deafening. Some knights collapsed permanently into unconsciousness. Others suffered psychic scarring that would mark them for life. Yet the lattice held. The Emperor adjusted in recognition, bending but not breaking, allowing the intervention to succeed only marginally. Mortals had endured proximity to divinity without annihilation, but barely. A fragile equilibrium emerged. Still sparks flew, machinery hissed, psychic energy pulsed through stone and ceramite, but collapse had been avoided. The Emperor had been measured, the Grey Knights had survived, and humanity remained intact, yet at tremendous cost. The chamber bore scars of energy arcs, unconscious knights littered strategic nodes, and machinery would require months of repair. The Emperor's presence had shifted subtly. His intent was no longer distant observation, but active, deliberate projection. The warning was clear. The next maneuver would allow no margin for error. The balance remained, but only by a thread. Grandmaster Voldus allowed himself a nod. The Emperor's cosmic maneuver had been contained, observed, and survived. The Grey Knights had executed the ultimate sacrifice, enduring psychic forces no mortal mind should bear. The Imperium remained whole, but the cost of survival was seared into every stone of the throne chamber, every mind present, and every neuron stretched by psychic overload. Humanity had been preserved, yet the galaxy now teetered on the edge of irrevocable consequence. The Emperor had moved, the Grey Knights had acted, and the future, poised between divine will and mortal endurance, had been tempered by sacrifice. The air over Terra felt heavier than usual, thick with the invisible weight of psychic resonance. Even beyond the walls of the Golden Throne Chamber, astropathic networks quivered as if sensing the aftermath of cataclysmic effort. The Emperor's presence, once tightly restrained, now pulsed with subtle fluidity, a lingering echo of the final confrontation with the Grey Knights. Sparks from ancient machinery still hissed in isolated corridors, machinery groaning under the strain of millennia-old conduits pushed past their limits. Servitors shuffled in silence, their sensors detecting microfractures in the lattice and residual psychic turbulence that even the most disciplined mind would struggle to endure. Grandmaster Voldus moved slowly through the chamber, surveying the results of the Grey Knight's ultimate sacrifice. The lattice that had restrained the Emperor was partially intact, but the energy arcs and psychic nodes bore the marks of near collapse. Several knights remained unconscious, their psychic shields permanently scarred by the strain of holding back divinity. Even those who remained conscious moved with careful precision, each step measured against invisible tremors of raw power that still pulsed through the chamber. The cost had been immense, yet the Imperium had survived another trial by divine pressure. Outside Terra, the consequences were already manifesting. Astropathic links flared intermittently, projecting visions of golden drones and impossibly vast figures to distant worlds. Pilgrims and psychers across multiple systems reported simultaneous prophetic experiences, blending awe, terror, and clarity in ways that reshaped belief instantly. The Emperor's presence, once static and confined, now lingered like a slow-moving tide, calibrating perception, reinforcing faith, and subtly bending the course of human history without a single overt act of divine intervention. The galaxy had been tempered, humanity had been tested, survival had been preserved, yet at a price that only those present truly understood. Within the chamber, the machinery struggled to return to equilibrium. Sparks hissed along conduits, and residual energy flared intermittently, threatening small local collapses that required immediate attention. Grandmaster Voldis issued silent commands to the remaining strike teams, stabilizing failing nodes and redirecting psychic currents to prevent aftershocks from destabilizing the lattice further. Every action was precise, every movement calculated, and every knight understood that the Emperor's observation was ongoing. He had allowed them to intervene, to endure, to sacrifice, but he had not retreated from the watchful, unyielding presence that radiated like molten metal throughout the chamber. The Emperor himself remained largely silent, yet his awareness extended through every corner of the throne, through machinery, through conduits, and into every psychic node active in the lattice. He did not move beyond restraint, nor did he fully withdraw. Each pulse, each subtle shift in his presence reminded the Grey Knights of the fine line they had walked, the razor's edge of containment and total collapse. The chamber was no longer a mere site of preservation. It had become a nexus where divine will and mortal endurance intertwined, a place where reality itself had been tested and survived. The aftermath extended beyond psychic energy. Physical damage to the throne chamber was visible and stark. Ancient conduits were scorched, machinery misaligned, and floors scorched by residual arcs of uncontrolled energy. Sparks leapt intermittently from twisted metal, and the faint hum of the throne now carried a new resonance, an echo of strain that would endure for decades. Servitors worked tirelessly to stabilize these systems, yet even their programming strained to comprehend the scope of what had occurred. The Grey Knights themselves moved cautiously, many with temporary psychic impairments, scars, or lingering feedback from the containment sequence. Their discipline remained intact, but the cost of endurance was clear to all who survived. Yet, despite the strain and the scars, the Imperium had survived intact. Humanity remained whole, its faith subtly sharpened, its collective psyche shaped by forces unseen. The Emperor's presence continued to pulse, but now with a tempered rhythm, a careful modulation that hinted at observation, calculation, and preparation for the inevitable next move. The Grey Knights had succeeded in their sacrificial endeavor, yet the weight of responsibility remained. They had preserved not just the Emperor, but the fragile continuity of the galaxy itself. Every action, every sacrifice, every scar would echo through history, remembered by no one, yet fundamentally altering the course of human civilization. Grandmaster Voldis allowed himself a moment to breathe, the weight of responsibility pressing even through his genetically enhanced frame. The chamber was silent now, yet every spark, every hum, every residual tremor of psychic energy was a reminder that the struggle was far from over. The Emperor had been contained, observed, and endured, but the galaxy now hung in a delicate balance. One misstep in future, one uncalculated movement, and the consequences could be apocalyptic. Yet, for now, mortals and God alike had survived. Survival, fragile and expensive, had been secured. The chamber lay in heavy silence, but it was a silence weighted with potential. Sparks still drifted from scorched conduits, and faint arcs of residual energy hissed along machinery scarred by the Grey Knight's sacrificial lattice. The Emperor's presence no longer surged like a tidal wave, but pulsed subtly, like molten metal settling in a crucible. Every motion, every imperceptible shift in his consciousness radiated outward, probing the lattice remnants, testing endurance, and observing the mortal minds that had survived the ordeal. He did not retreat, he did not act overtly. Instead, his influence lingered, a constant, unyielding reminder that the balance was maintained by effort, sacrifice, and the finest thread of precision. Grand Master Voldus moved through the chamber with methodical steps, surveying both his own strike teams and the machinery strained beyond design. The lattice, though intact, bore the marks of near failure, microfractures in psychic nodes, scorched machinery, and lingering tremors of uncontrolled energy. Several Grey Knights remained unconscious, their shields scarred, psychic faculties temporarily impaired. Those who were conscious moved deliberately, understanding that even a misstep could unbalance the chamber, even in its weakened state. Every action required exacting precision. Every breath was measured against the faint pulse of the Emperor's will. Beyond the walls of the throne, the Imperium was still feeling echoes of the confrontation. Astropathic networks intermittently overloaded, channels screaming and rebounding as if pushed by a force beyond comprehension. Pilgrimage worlds experienced shared visions, molten thrones stretching across horizons, shadows of godlike figures bending light and perception, fires moving with purpose as though alive. Humanity had been shaped without knowing it, tempered by fear, faith, and awe simultaneously. The Emperor's subtle projections were not merely observation, they were lessons in endurance, control, and the delicate tension between mortal and divine. The Imperium survived, but the galaxy had been irrevocably altered by psychic pressure alone. Within the throne chamber, machinery hissed intermittently, conduits still sparking, and energy arcs lit corners previously untouched. Grand Master Voldus issued silent commands, stabilizing failing nodes and ensuring the lattice did not collapse further. Every knight moved as both anchor and lens, their psychic energy redistributed to counter lingering distortions. One relic, still faintly glowing, continued to exert pressure, forcing the Emperor to calibrate, to observe, and to measure the mortal's endurance against his subtle will. Each movement, each pulse, each strained breath was both a test and a warning. Proximity to divinity bore consequences not visible to the unprepared. The Emperor, aware of every detail, allowed small strains to persist. He was both observer and teacher, measuring endurance and recalibrating intent, a presence both terrifying and incomprehensibly patient. Every conscious knight felt it, a pressure that compressed perception, distorted time, and seared the mind with awareness of infinity. Moments stretched and warped, sparks illuminated strained faces, shadows of twisted machinery, and the surreal lattice that had kept a god at bay. Time itself seemed to quiver under his subtle manipulations, a reminder that reality was not fixed, but contingent upon vigilance, discipline, and sacrifice. Grand Master Voldus signaled for assessment and recalibration. Strike teams moved with quiet precision, restoring nodes, stabilizing conduits, and redirecting residual psychic flows. The Emperor's presence, while subdued, continued to press outward, a constant awareness that no mortal mind could ever fully comprehend. Sparks hissed along metal, shadows twisted unnaturally, and the faint hum of the golden throne carried the resonance of both strain and triumph. Humanity had survived, yet every conscious participant bore the mark of proximity to the divine, exhaustion, psychic scarring, and a new ineffable understanding of mortal fragility. Finally, the chamber fell into a fragile calm. Sparks still arced intermittently, machinery groaned under latent strain, and the lattice, though diminished, held. The Emperor's will had been measured, his presence acknowledged, yet he had not fully withdrawn. The Grey Knights had executed their final sacrificial maneuver, enduring forces that no human mind should survive, yet preserving the Imperium and the fragile continuity of reality. The galaxy had been tempered by both god and mortal action, leaving the throne chamber as both testament and warning. Every scar, every unconscious knight, every twisted conduit carried the imprint of sacrifice, endurance, and cosmic consequence. Grandmaster Voldus allowed himself a single nod. The Emperor had moved, the Grey Knights had endured, and the galaxy remained intact, but fragile. The balance of divine will and mortal restraint had been achieved, yet only temporarily. The lessons of the Golden Throne, the scars of psychic endurance, and the subtle, lingering presence of the Emperor were reminders that survival was never granted. It was earned, one sacrifice at a time. Humanity endured, yet the future now teetered on the edge of inevitable consequence, poised between divine intent and mortal endurance. The Golden Throne chamber lay in a tense stillness, but it was the stillness of a wound that had not fully healed. Sparks flickered sporadically across scorched conduits, shadows twisting across warped machinery, and the faint, residual hum of psychic energy lingered like a heartbeat too large for the room. The Emperor's presence pulsed subtly, no longer aggressive but constant, a living weight pressing against every conscious mind in the chamber. His will, measured and deliberate, radiated outward, brushing against the lattice, testing endurance without breaking containment. It was a quiet warning. Proximity to divinity was never without consequence. Grandmaster Voldus surveyed the aftermath. The Grey Knights had endured the unendurable, yet many bore psychic scars, unconsciousness, or permanent impairment. Machinery strained under the accumulated energy of millennia, while conduits and psychic nodes bore visible fractures from the overload. Every spark, every hiss, every pulse was a testament to the delicate equilibrium between mortal restraint and divine presence. The Emperor had been measured, yet he had not fully withdrawn. His subtle, flowing awareness remained, a pressure that reminded all present that the balance of the galaxy had shifted irrevocably. Beyond the throne chamber, the galaxy itself trembled under subtle cosmic consequences. Astropathic networks pulsed intermittently with residual psychic energy, projecting visions of molten golden thrones and immense shadowed godlike figures to countless worlds. Pilgrims and psychers experienced simultaneous prophetic visions, impossible, terrifying, and awe-inspiring, reshaping faith, belief, and the collective psyche of humanity. Starships quivered in orbit around Terra, navigators collapsing under unseen psychic pressure. The Imperium had survived, yet it was forever changed. Humanity had been tempered, reality itself tested, and the Emperor's will subtly inscribed on the minds of billions, molding perception without a single overt intervention. Within the throne chamber, Grandmaster Voldus directed the remaining strike teams to finalize stabilization. Sparks hissed, conduits still glowed faintly with residual energy, and arcs of crimson and gold flickered across machinery scarred by psychic overload. Knights moved with measured precision, redistributing psychic energy, repairing nodes, and ensuring that the lattice maintained integrity despite the extreme strain. Every action was deliberate, every movement carried the weight of survival, endurance, and cosmic responsibility. The Emperor's presence, though less overt than before, remained an invisible gauge, observing, measuring, and recording the limits of mortal capability. The final moments of stabilization brought clarity, but also an eerie sense of forewarning. The Emperor's will had been tested, the Grey Knights had sacrificed beyond mortal expectation, yet the outcome was not triumph, it was survival. Sparks drifted across the chamber, shadows stretched unnaturally across the scorched floor, and the faint hum of residual psychic energy pulsed in the background like a distant drumbeat. The Imperium remained intact, yet the future had been recalibrated, poised between mortal endurance and divine intent. Every scar, every unconscious night, every trembling conduit was a reminder of the cost of containment, the fragility of human resilience, and the subtle, omnipresent weight of godhood. Grandmaster Voldus allowed himself a brief, measured breath, the enormity of the moment pressing even through his genetically enhanced frame. He surveyed the lattice, the exhausted knights, and the scarred machinery, recognizing both success and the peril that remained. The Emperor's presence was no longer an overt tidal force, but a latent, flowing weight, a reminder that the galaxy had been reshaped by their endurance and sacrifice. Humanity had survived, the Imperium preserved, yet the warning was unmistakable. The next cosmic movement would allow no margin for error, and the thin line between survival and annihilation had been demonstrated in its starkest form. The chamber settled into quiet hums of machinery and faintly glowing psychic nodes, yet every conscious participant felt the invisible gaze of divinity lingering. The Grey Knights had endured, the Emperor had been contained, and the galaxy remained poised between order and the potential for cataclysm. The Golden Throne, scarred yet functional, stood as both monument and warning, a reminder that survival demanded vigilance, sacrifice, and unwavering discipline. The future was uncertain, the balance delicate, and every action henceforth would carry the weight of both mortal endurance and divine intent.